don't believe I've ever begun one of my bonus sermon videos this way, with a prelude, with a disclaimer, I guess you would say, a preface. But this one needs that, I think. You're about to watch the video that Judy and I recorded in Afton, Virginia, at the Blue Ridge Tunnel, a 175-year-old tunnel that literally bores 700 feet below Interstate 64 through the Blue Ridge Mountains. When I go and do these bonus sermons, I always go somewhere that has captivated me, interests me. Something about it has reached out, and I said, yeah, there's something there. I call it the hook, in that's where what I'm filming, what I'm talking about, intersects with my absolute belief that everything is spiritual. And by that I mean every part of our lives has an aspect that is theological, that is spiritual, that is biblical, and how it connects together. That certainly happened to me as I was reading and researching and experiencing walking through the tunnel. But oftentimes I don't know what that hook is until I'm there, and that happened this time as well. And the hook speaks right to our current world, the one we inhabit. And that's why I need to give a disclaimer, because it's political, very much so. And you need to know that, I guess, going in. That's just sort of fair warning. This tunnel, you'll hear me talk about how it was built in the 1850s by Irish immigrants fleeing the potato famine in Ireland. It ran from 1842 to 1852. I may have those dates wrong, maybe 1847 to 1852, but that same era when the tunnel was being built. And they were not very well thought of here in the United States. The saying in most bars and pubs was no dogs and Irishmen allowed. They were shunned. They were discriminated against. They were, culturally different than the America of the 1850s. But that was where what astonished me, the tunnel, you'll see me talk about it inside and outside. It reflects our world right now in such a way that was astonishing when I made that connection. You see, right now, the current Trump regime is not tackling illegal immigration. It's not a political or law enforcement process. The current Trump regime has declared war, an open war on anyone of Latino, Hispanic descent. We listen to Donald Trump on the radio and on TV. Well, everybody who's a Mexican is a rapist or a murderer or a drug dealer, so we're cleaning them all out. We're building prisons, and Homeland Security now has been given $40 billion extra dollars in this insane tax bill so that they can continue this war. A war that is as likely to illegally incarcerate a United States citizen who's a student, who's done nothing wrong except perhaps a brush with the law when he was a kid. It's raking up and deporting United States citizens that have no arrest record. So it's not what this current regime, I don't call them an administration anymore, purports it to be. It's a war. And what hit me in the tunnel was every time we treat immigration like this, we do so to our detriment. And we do so in a way that lessens not only us, but everyone. Because without immigration, well, number one, none of us would be here. And this nation that we all love would not be the glorious republic it is without immigration. I just shake my head, when I hear people calling DEI something bad, and it's not, and they decry this wokeism that they point at me and say, you libs, you woke libs. And I love what Jane Fonda said, woke just means you give a damn about someone else. So that's going to come out in the video. And if your political persuasion or ideology is such that I've already probably triggered you, feel free not to watch it. That's your choice. You won't hurt my feelings. Trust me. You can just kind of turn it off now. But if you, like me, whether you completely agree with my own ideology or not, think there might be something worth pondering, then the magic of video is this is going to go black into a fade, and then a drone shot of the Blue Ridge Gap, Rockfish Gap in Afton, Virginia is going to come up. And I'm going to invite you to go with us and visit the tunnel, and hopefully at the end recognize once again, this is just another tidbit that confirms for me everything is spiritual. Everything. So we enjoyed making it. It was very hot, and this bad knee that I'm going to have surgery on was complaining the whole time, but it's a beautiful area, and this tunnel is something to marvel at. So I hope you enjoy it, and if you're turning off now, or if you're watching on, God bless you all. Hopefully it'll have something for all of us. So stay tuned, or see you whenever. It's your choice. Well, friends, family, folks, you are looking at a pretty impressive sight, aren't you? You're looking at the east portal of the Blue Ridge Tunnel. If you were to, from your vantage point, turn around 180 degrees, you would be looking east down into Rockfish Gap, Virginia. Behind me, 4,273 feet, is the west portal of this tunnel, and it goes straight through the Blue Ridge Mountains. 750 feet or so above us is Interstate 64. This is where they tunneled through the mountain, and they did so by hand. In 1850, a work team almost solely made up of Irish immigrants, and that's important, under the leadership of an architect and engineer named Claudius Crozet, French trained in Paris, served in the Napoleonic Army, came to the United States as an immigrant, figured out a good way to become a citizen was to join the military. He did, and eventually taught at West Point. Later, he was one of the founders of Virginia Military Institute. He was one of the principal partners of the Blue Ridge Railroad, which had built the spur line 17 miles coming up this way from the Lynchburg area, and had contracted with the state and the railroad to find a way to build a tunnel through the mountains. And that's what they did. They began work in 1850 on both sides of the mountain, but most of the early work was done here on the east side, which is very, very hard granite stone. You'll see some photos later on of the western side, some images and footage. On the western side, it's more sedimentary rock, which was problematic because they had to line the tunnel with brick. If you look at the tunnel, you'll notice it's unlike modern day tunnels that are more of a semicircular shape. It's much more of a higher arch, and it's narrower at the base. If you were to go to Italy and parts of Europe, anywhere where ancient Roman architecture still stands, this is a Roman arch. And in fact, this particular architectural engineering design is close to 3,000 years old, stable, solid. And drilling a tunnel by hand, this is the way you had to make the arch, pretty much. About 15 years ago, Nelson County, Virginia decided to reopen the tunnel. It had opened in 1858. It took 8 years to build. And the first train came through just before the Civil War began. In 1944, what was then Norfolk Southern abandoned this tunnel. They retired it, and just to the south is a modern day tunnel. There's actually CSX railroad tracks running parallel to the path we walked up here. So it sat abandoned for 60 or 70 years. Nelson County, Virginia decided to try to reopen it. It was a massive engineering undertaking. When they first came here, it was hip deep in water. So they've had to figure out how to drain water out of it because the mountains are porous. They do drain a lot of water. And in 2018, I believe, it may have been 2020, this reopened as a park. People can walk through. There's a fairly nice gravel path. And it's almost a mile to the west portal. Beyond that, towards the Shenandoah Valley in Waynesboro, there's another 1.5 mile trail, gravel trail, to the west portal. Day before yesterday, we hiked through it, and we've got some footage from there. We did it with headlamps on. It's incredibly dark inside. And some of the things I really want to show you, they just wouldn't come out in the video. So I did what I normally call my walk and talk. I'm going to try to edit some of that in because Judy and I have come back up here today. And we first in Appomattox and Lynchburg searched around and finally found a sporting goods store where we could buy lanterns. So we've got 2 lanterns that we hope will throw more light inside because there's a few things I want to show you inside. They're fascinating from an architectural standpoint. They're incredibly sort of thought-provoking from a historical standpoint. But here's the kicker. Here's the hook, as you hear me call it. They speak right to what's going on in our nation right now. And that's because we have to think about who did this, who built it. And it was built completely, all the labor was either Irish immigrants or African-American slaves, one or the other. Mr. Crozet thought of himself still as a general even when he was an architect and an engineer. It was said of him, he was a man you'd love to have working for you. He was not a man you'd ever want to work for. He was really hard to work for. And he was a very hard man to work for in an era where, especially if it was Irish life, well, Irish life was disposable. Because we'll talk more about that, and I'm going to hit this same point. In the 8 years of building this tunnel, over 200 men died. A historian who's in the area and associated with the University of Virginia, who herself is of Irish descent, said she can't walk into this tunnel without recognizing she's on sacred ground because there's blood in this tunnel. And she's right. So, come inside with us. A couple of things we're going to walk through. First, you're going to see some areas where it was concreted in and there's a brick in. Somebody had an incredibly stupid idea back in the 1960s. They were going to turn this mountain into a propane storage tank. Now go figure that. They put a 12-foot bulkhead on the east side and then further in another 12-foot bulkhead with massive valve and pipe and sealant in them. Never occurred to them that granite rock like this is so porous, that's why water comes in. So as fast as they could pump the propane in, it leaked out. It was a really dumb idea. And when the tunnel was rehabbed, first they had to go in and they had to blast out these 12-foot bulkheads. You'll see them as we walk in part of the way. And then there's some stuff on the rock and on the sides that, again, I want to call attention to that if they don't speak to the current morass and conflict we have going on in the United States about immigration and what's going on right now, where citizens, people who've broken no law, whether they're illegal aliens or not, are being arrested, disappeared, they're being sent to concentration camps. This is a testimony to that very idea and why, number one, it doesn't work, never has, and number two, it is utterly devoid of human ethics, morality, compassion, those type things. I'll get to that, and I'll preach a little bit. I have a feeling, probably. I found out on Monday walking through, I did that a little bit. But come on inside, and let's see the Blue Ridge Tunnel. How's that sound? We are about a third of the way from the eastern portal. We're still in the granite portion. Actually, the sedimentary rock that way is only about maybe the first quarter from the western portal. But what I want to point out here are these grooves here and right here. You see, they're running on a 45-degree angle. They're all the way up there and there. You can see them all through this rock. This is how this was drilled by hand. It was excavated out at the top and literally working hands, knees, crawling in from there. The workers had to use star drills, which is about a 5-foot long piece of steel, as hardened steel as they could make in the 1850s. And on one front, it had either forged or chiseled a star shape. And it was put in the rock, held there. Often it was held there by young boys, 5, 6, 7 years old, and their fathers were the ones hitting that rock with a 24-pound sledge. Okay? And that's how they drilled these holes into the rock, 5 feet, sometimes 7, 8, 9 feet. The person hammering it, usually the father, with his sons helping him, would determine, have I gone far enough or not? And that's when it would be filled with black powder. They would explode it. The economics were they couldn't leave the tunnel, which would have been safe, because that took too much time. And time was money, of course, back in 1850 as well as today. So oftentimes the explosions were too stout, too much powder, and people were hurt. If the men striking with the sledgehammer missed, don't forget there was usually a young boy or a slave or another worker holding that star drill just like this. If you're swinging a 24-pound sledge as hard as you can and you miss the top, this is what you hit. And in fact, bones were broken, hands were lost, people were crippled. In many cases, there were miners who had to start doing other duties because they'd lost an arm. It was incredibly hard work. It was incredibly dangerous work. And it was done almost completely by Irish immigrants. And when they started in 1850, they made $1.12 a day. That's it. That's all they made. Okay? Now you might say, well, if they weren't going to do it, we could hire guys from the countryside. Nobody would take the jobs. It was too dangerous. It paid so poorly. They said, no job is worth this. So you have to ask the question, well, why did so many Irish immigrants take it? Because 1845 to 1852 was the potato famine in Ireland. Irish folklore calls it the Great Hungering. And the United States was flooded with Irish immigrants. Why? Because it was either stay home and starve or come to America and hope to make $1.12 a day. The Irish walked out about every year, the 8 years it was being built. One year they walked out for almost 3 weeks, and they got a raise. They got a raise from $1.12 an hour to $1.25 an hour. But that humiliated Claudius Crozet and made him mad. So he started talking to everybody and anybody he could about renting African American slaves. And the next year, indeed, while the Irish were not working, he brought 40 or 50 African American slaves in here who had been rented, many of whom had actually been rented out, and they were the ones that built the original buildings at the University of Virginia. A man named Farrow, George Farrow, was the owner, landlord. He was a plantation owner who rented most of the slaves. And during 1857, they were working. It was said they should not be allowed to work in the tunnel. They couldn't drill, they couldn't blast, because of course slaves weren't smart enough. They thought that. There's still evidence of seeing slaves with sledgehammers with the star drills, so they did the work. In 1857, there were 2 slaves on the western portal loading flat cars of the spoil. The rocks had been blasted out, and the brakes failed, and that flat car took off down the hill into the Shenandoah Valley. Unfortunately, there was another flat car at the bottom. A horrendous crash happened, and these 2 slaves, one named James, one named Paul, were killed. Well, Mr. Farrow, no time passed at all, sent an invoice to Claudius Crozet. Oh, you owe me $1,300 for each slave. The going rate's $1,400. I gave you a bit of a price break, and he had to pay it. So, no more slaves were ever used on the project. They went back to using Irish immigrants. And some would ask, well, why did they do that? And it was a simple matter of economics. They were disposable. If one Irish immigrant died or was killed or maimed, crippled, there were 100 to take his place. Because again, they were coming to the United States. Yes, we were thought of as a land of freedom, a land of plenty, a land of opportunity, but staying home meant starving. So they decided to take their chances, and that's part of our legacy. And this tunnel is exactly a testament to what has somehow become a bad term lately, DEI. Oh my gosh, diversity, wokeism. Guess what? Wokeism built this marvel of the world. Think about that, folks. We should smoke on that just a little bit before we buy all the nonsense we're hearing in the news, the propaganda, every single day. Without Irish immigrants, I wouldn't be standing in this tunnel. There was a video, a film done about the building of this tunnel. It's so well done. And if I could get the copyrights, I would cut in part of that video. I'm going to link to it during this bonus sermon. One of the historians, she herself is of Irish descent. She's, I believe, associated with the University of Virginia. She made a point of saying when she comes here, she cannot come into this tunnel without remembering that this is sacred, hallowed space, because there's blood in this tunnel.
As far as the tunnel itself, there's blood down in there, and bits of bone. I mean, these guys didn't just fall over and have a heart attack. They were blown up. And that's important to me. I see it as a sacred place. And I sometimes think, well, those guys who were blown up, what would they want? Would they want their work to be shown? And or would they want to say, leave my bones alone? So I don't know the answer.
200 men died in here, carving channels like this in the rock so that they could get a railroad bridge through. And they were all immigrants. Think that through. The next time you hear somebody say, well, we'll have Americans do all those jobs that we're taking these people and sending them to El Salvador, Americans won't take their jobs. Without them, without all of us together, we die. Why don't people understand that? Isn't that the question? So, That's the hook. That's the thing to ponder. And the rest of it is just simply marvel at this tunnel. We're not going to go much farther today. We've already walked it once, but we're going to walk back that way to the eastern portal, and you'll get to watch it, to see the tunnel as the light gets better as we go out. So I hope you have something to think about from our time here together and what we're thinking about. And remember that inch diameter channel coming out of the rock. Remember how they were made. Pretty astonishing, is it not? And think about your grandkids, maybe 5, 6, 7 years old. They had a part to play in making that. Wow, huh? Okay, enough said. We're going to head out. You get to walk with us. After that humidity, I definitely need a break. We're on the west side, west portal. The parking area here is 1.5 miles on the trail that winds a good bit. We're not going that far. We just did the 4,200 and whatever feet of the tunnel. And you can probably see in the video here the humidity, the fog that's coming out of the tunnel on this side. Here are their channels. These are drill channels that you can see again how this was done by hand, which is pretty phenomenal to think about it. I may have had a video glitch in the middle of it as I was talking. I don't know. We'll have to wait and see. So I might be repeating myself, but part of what is absolutely so amazing to me is that this was considered a wonder of the United States engineering technology at the time. The longest tunnel in North America when it was built, and 100% built by immigrants and or slaves on that. We tend to conveniently forget that, do we not? Whenever that subject comes up. And it's coming up day and day and day after day right now. That we need to wake up and realize, you know what, the words on the Statue of Liberty, isn't that part of why we consider this such a great nation? And yet right now, the current political climate is moving to say, that doesn't matter. Give us your poor, your tired, huddled masses yearning to be free. Yes, send them here. We'll take them. No, we won't. That's what we're saying now. That's the hook this reminds me of. That's the spiritual aspect of this tunnel. Over 200 men died making it. And there was a sense at the time, well, gee, that's sad, isn't it? But they were Irishmen. Or in the case of a couple of slaves, they were slaves. They didn't use many slaves because 2 slaves died in an accident on a rail car, a flat car. And their owner sent an invoice. My slave died, give me $1,400 for each of them, and they had to pay it. The thought was when an Irishman died, oh well, sorry, but there's somebody else to take his place. They were cheap. And that's part of the equation, that's part of the calculus that comes into the thinking here. So we're going to walk back through, and we're going to switch cameras so that in case we didn't get footage here, we'll have decent footage. You're not going to have a whole lot to see inside, frankly, because it's so dark. But Waynesboro, Virginia is the nearest sizable town. Waynesboro is where the Blue Ridge Parkway ends, the Skyline Drive begins. And this incredible feat of engineering is tucked in here in the Blue Ridge Mountains. And a lot of people don't know it's here. If you get out at all, this place should be on your bucket list. The other side, I mean, I'm hiking it with a torn meniscus in my left knee. So it's doable by a lot of people. And to walk it and to understand the history of it, it's one of those real significant, maybe eerie experiences. We need more of those in our lives, I think. So, looks dark from here, does it not? But we're about to go back through it.